Hello and welcome to yet another episode of our podcast, Bor-Kothoki. Bor-Kothoki in Assamese means talkative. So we are here to just talk about various topics, but our core focus is on poetry. Today I have a guest, a wonderful guest uh, to describe her. She is a very vibrant lady who has different kinds of interests, and poetry is one of them. I know her for last 16 to 17 years, but she has not changed a bit in this last uh, so many years, and it is quite surprising to find such levels of innocence in a person for such a sustainable period of time. I welcome you and introduce all of you to my wonderful guest, Rajyashree Dutta. Rajyashree Dutta is right now joining us from Germany. Welcome, Rajyashree Dutta, to Bor-Kothoki.
Thank you, Dada. That's such a lovely introduction, such a sweet introduction. And as I was saying just a moment back, it's so nice to see you finally after so long. I know we don't talk very often face to face, but then I think we have always maintained the same sort of, what do you call relationship in a way that we talk, we check on each other at point, and I really liked what you said about the consistency of me, and I think, yeah, I mean, I also feel like I should, grow or like I should become somebody else at some point, but I can't. So I'm the same person, like, I'm not changing, and I don't think I'm gonna change ever. But thank you for asking me to join this one. And I really like what you're trying to do here. And as your name encapsulates, right, I'm also a big Bor-Kothoki. And so it's really a very good fit for me to be here because, yeah, I talk a lot. And yeah, somehow that also helps me in my job. But that was not intentional. But then, yeah, I talk a lot. So I think I'm one of the right kind of guests on your podcast.
Since you spoke about your job as well, I would like to start my conversation about how is poetry related to your job, or how does poetry influence your job?
Well, that's actually a very, very interesting question. And I always say, always, that it's because I always used to write and read poetry. And because of that, I really do well in my job. And that's something that I keep saying every time because to give you a background of what I do, so I started as an advertising account executive where I used to create all of these, nice briefs to create all of these big advertisements. So the first time when I got to know about the job, of course, I was an MBA student, then joined advertising, and I came from more like a commercial side of things. But then when I was in the advertising agency, the first time that people took notice is when I really wrote something very poetically. They really needed something so basically we always have a business problem, but then we always need to convert that to a human problem so that we can create the communication about a product or service accordingly. And when you need to decode the business problem to a human problem, you always have to talk from a humane side of things. You need to be very emotional about it. And when I was writing that decoding, the brief, it felt like someone is actually telling the person about their problem. And that sort of made the creative director come up with a very nice idea. And that's when I actually felt like, oh, because I come from a writing and poetry and reading background, so I'm able to really find that bridge between business and human. And that's how it sort of took off. And I think I have not looked back since then. And every time I go with my idea, I think it's the way I write sort of makes a difference more than and the idea itself. And I think that's what we keep saying. And now I lead a strategy team, and what we keep saying all the time is that strategy is nothing but your words, and that words part of story comes from my poetry and my reading and my writing. So yeah, if that answers your question.
Okay. I figured out quite a few keywords out here. And since you are from the marketing background, I would use the word keyword instead of just any other poetic language like metaphors or something like that. I would use the word keyword here.
Yes,
So,
absolutely.
yeah.
Yes, the keyword is the writing. The keywords are words, human psychology,
Yeah.
and human side. Yes,
Yeah.
those are the keywords.
So I was just wondering, like, what because you read a lot, and I I know that for very sure because I have seen you write about books every time you like a book, and now you also have a own uh, sort of like a Instagram handle where you talk only about books. So I will first start with reading books and how books have shaped you over the years.
Well, I feel like everything that I know, or everything that I know about life, or people, or anything like culture, I think it's all because of books. And thankfully, I started reading at a very, very early age. So it's all because of my dad. So my dad used to really read a lot, and he used to love history. And in fact, he had this dream of writing a book at some point, and he used to secretly write a diary. And when I was a kid, I think I'm the only person who he told about his diary and his books, and he introduced me to all of these books. And I think you won't believe the first set of books that I read were the classics, all of the Shakespeare's, the Dickens, and all of that. And I, honestly speaking, it was not the right age for me to read those classics because I was in school and everything. But then he just introduced me to it, and I took away a lot from those, right? Because totally understood the cultural setup of the society and the human side of things. And I also read a lot of Assamese books at that point of time, and there was a point when my school library actually banned me from entering the library because I used to always take books, Assamese books, and then I used to finish it like over the weekend, go back on Monday and ask for a new book. And then literally the librarian told me that you cannot take books like this because you need to study your school course, course book. So that's what he was telling because I was reading so much. But yeah, going back to how it has shaped me, right? So I think even before I used to, I mean, I travel a lot now, but even before I started traveling, I think I already had traveled to those places through my books, so that's how vivid I used to find the stories in the book. And that is something so eye opening because when you read a book and you sort of know about different cultures, different societies, different people, you kind of understand so much more than what you would otherwise when you are just in one place. And I feel like what I have always taken out from reading different cultures, different people, is that at the core, it's people are the same. All the people are the same. They have similar problems. They have similar understanding of life. It's just the cultural narrative that sort of changes their perspectives. And that to me was such a beautiful thing, that you can have the same problem, but you can also have a different viewpoints based on where you are from or how you have grown up and you are brought up. And I feel like everything in my life has sort of shaped to for the better, all because of books. And I feel like I'm usually a very happy person. And a lot of times people ask, why, how can you be happy, don't you have problems in life? And the only answer I can give is that no, I do have problems, but I also know that if I see the problem as a, not as a problem, but as a different way, in a different way, I would find a solution there. And that is something I have learned from books, because what the problem that we have as, as individual or as a person or as a, as a society, somebody else actually sees it as an opportunity, so that's something I have learned from books. So I feel like books have kept me happy, books have kept me sort of content and peaceful in a way. And yeah, the thing that you said about me not changing, I think it's all because of books, because I'm really happy because of the books that I read, or because of the way I sort of tackle the stories, and that's why I'm not aging, or maybe I'm not getting into the, the older mindset yet. So yeah, books have been there all along.
I remember, I when we first started interacting, knew you through social media only. So I knew that you were so and so, you are you're working in a marketing job, but I did not know much about you. But I one day you just
Hello.
nothing. It is your positive attitude also that uh, helps you to for foster relationship also. So is it something because of your uh, upbringing and how you were raised?
The positivity part, I think, yeah, I mean, I feel like, you know, when I was growing up, I think what my dad had always ensured is that, life is never a straight line, right? He always used to say that life is never a straight line. There would be ups and there will be down. And but I think what you need to be able to do in life is prioritize what you want to be. Like, he always told me that never run after money, So that's why probably I'm not rich at all. So he said never run after money, never run after like these milestones that you call like as success, right? Being this or being rich, or being buying a house and all of that. What you should be always thinking of is how you can sort of feel a sense of peace and calm and content. And I feel like that sort of made me look at life in a different way, that hey, I don't always have to think about things that others are prioritizing in life. I can have my own way of looking at life. And this is also another thing, right? Like, I feel like when we keep thinking about this materialistic sort of success, we always have this comparison, like, okay, by this age I should have this because somebody else is having that, so that way. But when you think that, okay, am I happy, or am I being content in my life, then you just feel like, oh, I don't have to have everything else, everything what else others are having, because my priorities are different in life, so I think that is how I sort of learned how to take this competition, or take this, like, hustle, or like, this like aggression out of life. And I think it was like a habit. In the beginning, it was difficult to kind of think only for yourself and not compare yourself with others. But then over a period of time, it just becomes a habit, and then you just like, oh, yeah, it's fine. And it also is like so easy to just not think of complicated things in life, because then you will just be yourself. You're living in the present. You are not worrying about the future. And I feel like this is something that automatically comes to me when I also, like, say, talk. You talked about relationship. When I talk to somebody, right, I would really want to talk to somebody, and not because I have a motive behind, or I'm trying to gain something. Just because I want to live in that moment, knowing that person, understanding that person. So I feel like that's where the positivity comes from, like not complicating things. So yeah, it's a wound up answer, but at the core of it, it's like the simplicity of it. Like, I just want to do things because I want to do it, and not because of connecting it back to a bigger milestone or bigger gain or anything like that.
Okay, coming back to our core focus, that is poetry. What kind of poetry do you like to read or write?
Well, this is very interesting actually. So while I'm not reading a lot of poetry at this point, the one poet that I always go back to is William Wordsworth. And I feel like I am so influenced by his poetry that every time I pick up my pen and want to write something, it's always about nature, about the underlying philosophy of nature and human. So that way, I feel like my life has been so shaped by Wordsworth, in so many different ways. Because, I mean, of course, we come from Assam, so we have nature around us, and that is the first thing that we see, right? But then appreciating nature is something completely different. And I think that nuanced appreciation had always come from Wordsworth poetry. And I also don't even remember how I got into his poetries, but then I remember talking about reading about all these beautiful flowers which we didn't even know in Assam, right? Like daffodils, water cups, and all of those. And I found those so beautiful. I still remember like how he explains, right, nature, like the sun, sunlight falling on those grass and twinkling and glittering. And I just feel those are so engrossing and so beautiful. So yeah, he's the poet that has always sort of influenced me. And then I also read, there was a point when I was also reading a lot of Emily Dickinson, but not anymore. I think there was a point when I really loved her because of her, you know, the morality, the kind of the nuances that she was talking about life. But I think at some point I found those too heavy, so I left that, and then again went back to Wordsworth. I think what happens with Wordsworth, right? Of course, there are very philosophical layers. There are very heavy layers, but then at the core of it, because he compares everything to the nature and nature's element, it feels like so real, so approachable. So yeah, so he's the one poet I will never stop reading, probably.
Okay. You still did not answer what kind of poetry do you write?
Oh, okay. So I think for me, I like poetries which sort of, you know, very simple. They don't complicate things. Like they say things as it is, and then kind of let the interpretation be on you, that you can interpret it as a very big philosophical concept, or you can interpret as a simplistic, what is happening around it. So I think for me that would be the genre. I don't know if there is a name for it, but that simplistic kind of poetry is what I like. And yeah, and also like in Assam we have Navakanta Borua. His poetries I love. And yeah, yes, so he was also one person who I felt a similar connection. Like he talks of simple things, but you can take out such philosophical meaning from all of his poetry. So yeah.
Yeah, e- even his poems written for children can
Yeah.
be seen as philosophical poems. If I look back to as an adult, I think yeah, they are very philosophical. So,
Yes. Yes, exactly. Yeah, I there was this poem, right? Gulab.
hmm,
Oh, I used to be such a fan of that poem. And when I was reading it as a kid, I was like, oh, it's gulab. And then when I grow
mhm,
up, and then you can find so many layered meanings. And this is exactly what I'm saying. Like, you can see every stage of your life, you can go back to reading those and find a different sort of meaning.
mhm. Okay. So, what are the books that you are reading right now? Because I see a lot of uh, posts like you like posts like these are the books I read this week, and even if you count, there are more types of books, and those are just fiction books. And apart from that, you are also reading non-fiction books. So,
Yeah. So how I am trying to read books this year. So usually every year I try to make um a goal of reading 100 books, and then most times it never reaches to 100 books. It will be like 60, 70, like that. And but then I get obsessed about it, and then I kind of read it, like say I start in the evening 6 o'clock, and I will not sleep and read whole night. So I felt like that's a very dangerous kind of behavior and habit. So this year from 1st of January, I decided that I'm gonna be consistent but then not overdo it. So every day I will read, like say morning an hour and a half, afternoon 2 or 3 hours a day. And that's how I'm going to do it. And that has been a good habit because I'm able to actually finish more books than I would have in the past years. So at this point I am reading my 61st book of the year, and it's like fiction and non-fiction both together. So the book that I'm reading currently is called Billet, but don't ask me as yet because I'm still in the very beginning of the story.
Okay.
But the second last book that I was reading is called Just Kids by Patti Smith. So it's again, she is also a poetess, a rocker, and it was a memoir. So I actually also recorded a video about it because that book really sort of make me cry, make me laugh, and make me feel so many emotions because she in this book she talks about her friendship and relationship with a person called Robert Mapplethorpe. He's also an artist, and it actually is like a canvas of the 70s and 60s art scene in New York. And so it's like so much pop culture put together in that book. It's memoir, it's a story about him and her, but then it's also so much more than that. And surprisingly, because she's a poetess, it's also such a coincidence, right? She's a poet, and she sort of also talked about her thought process of how she write poems, how she converted those into music, and then how she really fused those two genres, like poetry and music. So yeah, it was very interesting to read. But talking about your question, I read all kind of books. It's I do like fiction for sure, but nonfiction sort of keeps me on ground, if that makes sense, because I also have to read a lot of nonfiction for my job, all these cultural insights and stuff. But yeah, fiction becomes my escape.
Yeah, I agree to that. Fiction takes you to another world, which is your imaginary world. But non-fiction is like sometimes can be very taxing because it is very real. You have to read it
I
because
agree.
you have to read it. Yeah.
I absolutely agree, and especially for nonfiction, sometimes say if it becomes too narrow in terms of what kind of audience it is for,
Mhm.
it can get very deadly. I recently read a book called Doppelganger, and it's supposed to be a political book, but then very much for USA, the North American countries. And so even though I tried my level best to kind of read this as much with honesty and passion, there were times when I was like zoning out because I'm not getting those concepts because it's not relevant in
Yeah,
my life. So yeah, it can be very taxing.
yeah, but it's like I I started reading non-fiction because I had to build a habit of reading non-fiction because I was preparing for an exam after say like 20 years, which is a very long gap, and I had to read non-fiction before that to prepare myself to getting back to my study. So I I was just creating a habit of reading non-fiction, and in the beginning it was very taxing. Like even though it was very simple non-fiction books, like it was a story about a, woman author, like how she got inspired to write the book. So,
Mm-hmm.
but in the beginning, it was a very simple book, but it was very, and just for the sake of not. like the meaning in that book. I'm talking about that book, but later I went on to read very serious books, and uh, like it was one of the book is called Economist Gandhi, which is almost like a thesis. Like it was, I could read it easily. Then there was another book on what do you say uh, about Assam Accord. I could
Hmm.
read that as well easily. So that like building that habit really helped me.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it's all about habit. Like initially, the attention span would be so short, but then over a period of time, it becomes like, oh yeah, when the moment you start reading, then the focus stays. But I also wanted to ask you, what kind of fiction do you read, and what are you reading now?
I read all kinds of fiction books, and I read Murakami a lot. So I like Murakami because after reading one fiction book, I can then easily switch on to his non-fiction way because he uses fiction tools in non-fiction. So I don't consider fiction as fiction. So I mean I don't consider that non-fiction as fiction.
Mm-hmm.
So that is one book. So, but the last book I liked is another Japanese author. The name of the book was Melis. Then
Mm-hmm.
it is very interesting because it is a story about uh, a an author who murdered his friend. So, yeah, who is also,
Very interesting.
so if you are a writer, you should read that book.
Okay. Yeah, you said the name is Malice.
Yeah.
Ah, okay. I'm gonna
Okay.
read this because I
And
I do
the
like.
and this same author, another book called Devotion of Suspect X. That is also a very interesting book.
Okay.
So
Amazing. I'm gonna read it. I do like the Japanese writers. I mean, they have such a, wide topics,
yeah,
like wide range
yeah,
of topics that they write about. Yeah, okay. This is very interesting. Now you got me hooked.
yeah. And I read also a lot of translated books. Like
Mm.
I think I forgot the name of the author. It's there are a few books that I the Goat Thief. I think
The Book Thief.
Goat Thief.
Oh, the Goat Thief. Wow, that's a very interesting one. Is it from which country?
It's from India only, so I think it's from the south. I believe it's from Kerala or Karnataka.
Ah, it is from by this person, Perumal Murugan.
Yeah, yeah. All his books
Okay.
are very interesting.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I mean, I also read a lot of translated books, but then lately the translated books have been from different languages to English
yeah.
and not necessarily from South Indian languages to English. But I actually have been wanting to read couple of South Indian books. I forgot the name, but one book has been topping their chart for some reason. But I also like am little skeptical because when I see like a book becoming too popular, I feel like that's not the kind of book I would want to read, So, because I find it's like too massy, too popular, too familiar kind of way.
Yes,
So I'm gonna
even
still
I
see,
do
yeah.
that. Even I do that. Like like uh, if it's a massy, I feel that somehow the book gets diluted after a certain point of time. Like
We,
I, fe- I a very good example is the book called Q&A. which was later on adapted to Slumdog Millionaires, and at that
Millionaire,
time
yeah.
it was diluted at that time. So when I first read that book, it was like when it was released, I think it was around 20 years back. So it was very interestingly written. Like each chapter was one question, and the backstory of how did he came to know the reply to that question was very gripping. So uh, when a book
Yeah,
becomes
it's so.
massy, I try to avoid that. So
No, I totally understand your perspective because same happens with me. Like, so there was this book called the Little Life, and then it became too massy now. But then I had read it like way back when it wasn't even a thing, and so I was like, okay, I love that book at that point of time, but because now everyone is talking about it, I'm like, I'm not gonna be picking it up now, probably if I
yeah,
were, you know, yeah, the old me. So that's what I was thinking. Yeah, I do get you because most times I feel like when it becomes too popular, then it also you don't know like the quality of the book anymore. Like, was it supposed to be a little bit like more nuanced or not? Like, I also keep reading about this new writer, not new exactly, Colin Hoover. So everybody likes her and everybody reads her, but then I wouldn't read her because everybody reads her. And but thankfully, I also saw an article where people were really kind of putting together pros and cons. And then what I have gathered from that is that she writes very what you call thriller way. She tried to kind of overhype things, and that's what I would not want to read. And so my judgment was correct. So that's what I'm saying. Like, sometimes it can become a little cheesy and cheap in a way. Not
yeah,
no judgment to people reading,
yeah.
but then my perspective.
I would I would if you ask me one suggestion, I would suggest Anjum Hassan's books, because in each book,
Who?
see Anjum Hassan.
Who's okay?
So in each book, she tries to redefine herself and write a new
Mm-hmm.
kind of book. So there is no set pattern of her books in. So each book is kind of a evolution for her. So if you read her, like in the first book, you will see that there is a slight kind of immaturity because she was very new to writing books. Like she's a great writer. She was more
Mm-hmm.
into essays before that. She was an editor
Mm-hmm.
of some e-magazine also. So she was more. She wrote wonderful essays. So when her first book came out, it was fairly simple. But in the next book, she took a huge leap. And it was like the name of the book is called The Cosmopolitan. So
Okay. Yeah, no, I'm gonna read it because I sort of like this, what you say, that, with
mm,
every book, you kind of evolve, because life is
it's
evolving, you
not
also
just
evolve.
evolved. Like I'm not saying like there are many authors who evolved, but she kind of redefines herself in each book. So you will not expect
Mm.
that from her book. And recently, she also released another book. It's a fiction based on like Mughals. I forgot the name, but I think, but it's also a good book.
Okay.
So from
Okay. Now you
cosmopolitans
you
to
you got me
this,
interested.
this it was very wide kind of variety.
Yeah,
Mm.
that's actually very interesting. I also wanted to ask you in this regard, right? So when you sort of see her books, do you also see that yes, the topics are different, she's reinventing in a way, but do you still the writing style also being different, like the evolve, or the writing style is still the same? How? What do you
Her
think?
writing style is evolving because her writing style is literary fiction. So literary fiction is like constantly evolving because you have to read a lot. So uh, you develop a kind of what do you say, a huge vocabulary, the kind of words which should be used at what point of time. That is very
Mm,
important. And it's not just using flowery words, but it's also about uh, uh, what do you say, knowing the right word to be placed at the right point. So
yeah.
sometimes the words are very simple, or sometimes it is like, okay, it takes me to a different level of understanding as well.
Mm. Okay, interesting because I always try to understand like if a writer has a particular writing style, and with every book how is it evolving, you know? So the way you had explained about it, I think that's also another nice perspective to see. Like you know what it also kind of depends on as the reader, right? As a reader,
Yeah,
what are you expecting and what are you kind of observing, you know, because there would be so many facets, and as a reader, based on your interest, your um, kind of you know passion, you just kind of pick things that you connect to the most. So that way, yeah, it's very interesting to see this different perspectives.
yeah. So is there any book that made you also like inspire you to write something?
Yes, many. Actually, yeah, so this is actually my long-term plan to write my book. And to be honest, I have already started writing. And I think I always wrote, you know, but then I always wrote for myself because I feel like I have so much. You know, writing for me is more like a reflection of what I'm thinking, what I'm wanting to do in life. So I always keep writing because I have so many emotions, I have so many thoughts coming all the time. So I just write, and that is more like I'm talking to myself, but in a written form, you know. So that's how I do it. And I have been constantly writing. Like when I was in school, I used to write, uni and first job, second job, everywhere. Just that I don't publish, like not as much, right? But now I'm thinking of taking that leap of faith and publishing. So I'm kind of fine tuning things and all. But sometimes you just want to be a reader and not a writer. But there are some writers who kind of make you feel like you need to publish now, you know. And one such person that I have come across in the recent time is called Dolly Alderton. And she's not like those very literary kind of writers. And honestly, on a regular day, probably I would not even have read her, you know. But what made me start reading her is my book club. We have a book club. We have a couple of book clubs in Berlin that I am a part of, and one of those actually picked this book called Good Material, and by her, and I read it, and I felt like she just talks about things as she's feeling it, and you know how she's observing it, and that sort of made me feel so in a way happy, thinking that hey, what you think, you should be able to write the way you know I usually do anyway. And you can also publish those things because there would be somebody who will always connect to those things, you know. So I don't know what it is, but she kind of makes me want to publish, you know, and write more. So this is one person. And the other person again is another lady called Sally Rooney. So I really like her books, and I feel like she does not her books are what you call, there is nothing that big, you know. There would be no like say big things happening in her book. There wouldn't be this crescendo moments that happen in life. So her books won't have those crescendo. It will be like just about day to day life and how things are happening, how two people are talking and all of that. But then she writes in a way that makes you feel like, okay, I need to be able to write about my emotions, you know. So this is how it happens. And I think the reason why these two people make me want to write is because my kind of writing is also that I want to chronicle my emotions. I want to chronicle what is happening in my life, how I'm feeling, because tomorrow I won't feel the same anymore. So I need to be able to kind of somewhere keep these emotions and feelings alive, so that's how it is. Yeah.
Okay. Since you also spoke about book clubs, how does a book club help?
Okay. There are many, many sort of answers. So, see, I think for me, because I'm already a reader, so I sort of feel like it just adds to that. But if I were not a reader, then book clubs can really be like the best thing that can happen to you, because then at least it gives you a timeline to read a particular amount of books, right? Number of books. And for me, what I do is I usually try to read like 6 to 7 books every month. And the first 6 books would be like, say, if I'm reading 7 books in a month, the first 6 books would be like the regular that I would be reading, but the seventh book would be always the book club book, because I want to read it on time to go and discuss it, right? Yeah. But what I also love about book clubs is that you kind of become a part of a community of same similar mindset, like-minded people. And I can't tell you how it helps you sort of, prioritizing your life, because I want to be a writer, right? So it sort of gives me that, added energy, thinking that, hey, these are the people who would be there to support me. So I should not keep delaying, for example, so that kind of feeling. So you just feel like so supported. Um, and also, I have been able to connect with different kind of professionals like agents, publishers, and all of those through these book clubs. It's so much fun. And it's it's like so cool, because one of the person I met in one of the book clubs is actually a published author. She also told me this story about how she found an agent through book clubs. We were like, wow, this is what is happening to all of us. We are meeting agents in book clubs. So yeah, yeah, but it's also like the habit in general. Like if somebody is not a reader, I would highly recommend that that person joins a book club, so that at least those couple of books you would be reading. Yeah. So yeah, everybody should be a part of a book club. I'm a part
Mm.
of 3 book clubs here in Berlin.
Okay. You actually inspired me to join back to a book club. I was once invited to a book club, and there they had an eligibility criteria. It said that you can join only if you have intention to write a book. So,
Wow,
okay,
that's so
so
cool.
said I joined the club, and although if I have an intention, there is no way to prove it. So I just have to say that I have intention to write a book. But the problem that I faced in that book club is that all the members of that book club was that they were only interested in non-fiction. And when I first spoke about fiction with such a passion, they thought
Mm-hmm.
that it was quite awkward to speak about fiction with so much passion, because I spoke about the book. It was a book called The Girl from Nongrim Hills.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a book written by what was her name? Ankush Saikia. Uh, okay, he is he is from Tezpur, but he grew up in Shillong. So the book is
Okay.
set up in Shillong, and the thing that I liked about this book is that uh, he described the book in such a way that the protagonist, as he moves, navigates to the city of Shillong, you could visualize the city like as if you are with him. So that was the very USP of the book, and
Yeah.
pick up any book that is like thriller. I really like thrillers, so I don't look at whether it is good or bad.
Mm.
So I just pick it up, and so it was a good book. So uh,
Mm. Yeah, that's actually a very it's a sign of a very good book, I would say.
yeah,
If it's able to immerse you in the situation or it's the story. And for me, that's one of the biggest
yeah,
criteria of like picking up a book, that and I also trust certain writers to be able to do that, like Murakami, for example. He makes you
yeah,
feel like you are seeing things. And the other day there was a question coming up, have you watched any of his movies, like books that turned into movies? And I'm like, I'm never gonna watch any movies based on his books, because the books have already made me see a movie. So it's that
yeah,
evident, that vivid. And then I also find this lady called Elena Ferrante. She writes books in a way, like she mostly talks about Naples in Italy, and also cities around it. The way, and because I have also been to Naples, what I see is that what she writes in her books, you actually feel like you are walking on the lanes of Naples, because she explains things with so much nuance, so much beauty, and all of that. And of course, it's not a beautiful place, but the way she explains, you kind of see things happening. You just sometimes you feel like you are smelling those onions, the
yeah.
garlic. It feels that like visceral. So that's the power of writing, right? So I feel like what you picked up about Ankush's book, that's the correct kind of book, because it can make you a part of that story and make you see it.
Yeah, actually, I became a fan of his because of the first book that I read, and later on, he also created another series of crime thrillers. Of one of
Yeah.
which is called Dead Meat. It is based on the Delhi Tandoori murder case. So
Oh,
I could
wow.
visualize that crime immediately. So
Yeah. Yeah.
uh,
আমাৰ অসমত এখন কিতাপ আছে না, অসীমত যাৰ হেৰাল সীমা?
yes, I
Yes,
remember.
oh my God. Yes, that book has was so real, like so like vivid in my memory. When I
Yeah,
had read it, I think I have read it twice when I was a kid once, and then when I have grown up twice, I have read it. And trust me, I can't forget, because it had that ability to make you feel like a part of it. There was a point when I actually thought the Dikho river, right? So
yeah,
the boat floating and all. I actually think it's there. Like you will go in by the river, and you will just go inside the jungle, and you will find that place. Because you can't not think about that place not being there. It was so real, so real. So I feel like that's such a sign of a good writer, right? That he can make you be a part of it. You just like see it with your eyes.
yeah. I just remember that. Like you also spoke about Murakami. Like I remember when Murakami writes, I remember I could visualize. Uh, like even I thought that I could speak with a cat.
Right?
Yeah,
Yes,
I could. I,
exactly.
I could also go to somewhere else to a secret passage. Uh,
Right? Exactly. And I always felt like I see things, when I read his books, I see things like Norwegian woods. When I had
yeah,
read that book, there was a point when I was like feeling the snowflakes on my nose.
yeah,
I'm like, what is happening to me? It's so real. Yeah. I totally agree. The cat part, oh, because I love cats. So of course, Murakami, that's another maybe reason why I love Murakami, because cat is such an important part of his writing. Yeah. Yeah, so probably you and I both should meet in a Murakami world. You go inside your passage, I go inside mine, and then we meet there.
yeah. So I think fiction also helps us. This the way you imagine also. Like suppose you are going there. Oh, like Murakami said that, or some other like I, I forgot the name of the author. Saw that I was in a what is a poetry farm, so I could imagine that story there. So
Yeah, and also honestly, Dada, I also feel like fiction could also teach you so much about life and culture, right? And like for example, first time when I started reading books about the World War II, right? I think it's because of the fictions that I kind of got a timeline of what was happening, not because I read history or, and then when you read fictions, you also pick up those events, and then you go back and do your research and you know more. So I feel like fiction for me is also that, like, it sort of gives me a leeway to do more research on actual topics, so all of that, like, I keep reading, as I was telling you in the beginning, that I keep reading books about human psychology, societal problem from different cultures. And I feel like when I read a book from India and a book from Japan, or a book from, say, Korea, or a book from US, I see those timelines so clearly, like what was happening during, say, 30s, during 40s, and all of that. And when you go back reading about it from non-fiction point of view, you actually see that those are real. Those were not like just made up imagination. Those were very much based on real facts, right? So that's
yeah,
how I think it's a loop. Fiction turns into non-fiction, non-fiction turns into fiction. So it's a loop of, at the end of the day, it teaches you something.
yeah. So I think poetry also does the same. Like I remember I was sitting in my office and I saw that a wasp was trying to go out of the office and it was hitting the window constantly.
Mm-hmm.
So at that point of time, I just wrote a poem that even I am feeling clueless. Like I can see the outer world, but I cannot like go out of it. So I'm also, like that wasp also. I'm also perhaps hitting the uh, window uh, poetry from different parts of the world. So and it was one of them I remember. He wrote about a bird who
Mm-hmm.
keeps on trying to get out of the building, but ultimately lost her life. So
Mm-hmm.
it was just an illusion, and if the illusion was not there, the life would have been saved. So
Yeah.
everyone takes the situation differently, but the,
Mm-hmm.
everyone faces the same kind of situations. Like
Yeah, absolutely. And I also like how you explain that, you were feeling, you saw something, and then you like drew a parallel to your own life.
yeah,
And I think this is so amazing, right? And this is what also, like, the poetries that I used to read kind of made me feel like we're talking about nature, but there is also an underlying, concept, underlying meaning to all of this. And somehow I also feel like, poetry is such a crisp way to talk about a bigger story. It's like, a poetry could also, just one poem could be as equal to a novel, like a 600-page novel, right? But here it's like 10 lines, 10 sentences, but it can say the same impactful story as a big novel. So it's also that, right? So it's beautiful, like
yes.
crisper, shorter version of a big story.
Just that it's for a beginner it might be difficult, but coming to my point of building a habit, if you start with fiction, it becomes easier for you to uh, read poetry. That is my opinion on it because once you start reading fiction, then you start imagining things, or you can build parallels out of the similar things happening around you. From there, you
Yeah.
evolve with uh, writing poetry, or even reading poetry.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. And I think there are also so many writers who are so lyrical, even when they are writing, say, novels or prose pieces, but their writing is so lyrical that it feels like a poetry, you know? So that's also another form of writing that I really like. And coming to the point of like the topic of habit, I absolutely think what you said is right, but it's also the vice versa, right? If you are
mhm,
somebody who is reading poetry, I would say somebody who's new to poetry should take it slow, like, you know, read the
yeah,
simpler poetry, like say Wordsworth. He's the right person to start with, for example, right? And then you go into the more deeper, more like complex sort of poetries. And yeah, that's how it should be, because it's again, you have to be interested from inside. You know, you can't be just, oh, everyone is doing it, so I should be doing it. I don't think the interest comes like that. It should be, okay, let me understand what is it about, let me understand the uh, the different meanings, what do I interpret from it. And I think when you do it for yourself, from inside, from for your interest, it just kind of builds on that, right? So it should be because of that, I would say. But coming to the point of poetry, um, tell me, like, because I'm not reading as much Assamese poetry that I should be reading. My mom would literally want to kill me, because she was an Assamese lecturer, literature, and she's the one who really made me read a lot of Assamese novels and poetries and everything. But recently, I've not read many. So, who are the like upcoming ones that you would recommend for me to read, for example?
even I don't read much Assamese poetry, but recently I came across a book by Dr. Jharna Chaudhary. She's a very young girl. She recently passed out her university, and she is she came to my notice when she was posting her pictures in Instagram and Facebook about her embroidery. And
Mm-hmm.
embroidery is kind of a lost art. Uh, and it was not just a normal embroidery. She was recreating classical arts in embroidery, and later on she started creating her own art. So recently, she also published a book on poetry, for which the cover was embroidered. Uh,
Ah,
I,
that's very interesting.
if you just wait, I will just show you the book. If you just allow me. It's
Okay. Oh, I find this very interesting. I remember wanting to learn embroidery, and also actually ended up learning embroidery. Ah,
the
okay,
name of the
Kaya.
book is
Yeah.
Kaya, and you can see it.
This is 3D art. Oh, beautiful
Okay,
one.
and this book is very interesting, and she published a lot of copies. So yeah, just imagine the amount of effort put in each book to embroider
Yes.
the jacket of each book. Okay,
Wow, this is like this, I love this, because you know
this is a
she is
different kind of
combining.
the devotion that she.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and inside the book also, you will see the art. It is done by
Ah,
Nilim Mohanta, and
yeah.
although it is done by Nilim Mohanta, it is very much inspired by her uh, embroidery art. So
Yeah. This is
it is,
beautiful.
so you can see a needle and the the face also looks like Dr. Jhanaj. Yeah, so you will see, and this is very related to the poetry. So this kind of art.
Yeah.
So
Wow,
very
this is
customized
amazing.
art. I would suggest this book. So
Yeah, I'm gonna be in Assam in January, so I'm gonna
yeah,
definitely go pick it up. This is
yeah,
beautiful. I also like that she has kind of brought together two different kind of,
yeah.
art, like poetry
Actually,
and
three
also her
different kinds of
embroidery.
art. Actually, three different kinds of art, like the uh, drawing, then poetry, and each of them is in sync. So and the poetry,
Beautiful.
the poems are also related to, like there is one poem called Kagaz Pul. There is one also related for with embroidery, what it actually means to her. So
Hmm.
I think you should read
Wow.
this. This is very, like, it comes right from her heart.
Absolutely. I'm very looking forward to actually pick it because I always like it when there is something new that artists can create. Like, so
Yeah,
she's creating something very new and I
yeah,
really find it very unique. So I'm definitely gonna pick it up. Thank you for
yeah.
recommending
And
this one.
I don't know how much you will like the poetry, but I think you should definitely collect it just for her effort, and uh, because it is a limited collection as well. So you should,
Okay, I will.
yeah. So it is
No, I will
available
collect it.
in
And
Amazon as
also,
well.
okay, Amazon, I don't know if they will deliver here, but I'm gonna definitely
Oh, you can
pick
just
it. Also,
like, you can just get it and get it delivered in your house whenever you are
in
visiting.
Assam.
So yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Also, to add to that, I'm a very non-judgmental kind of reader. Like, I might not like something, I might not, just move on to another one. But then I, I always appreciate the efforts that people put in, like while writing and while, creating art. So I would definitely give it a try.
I really like the poems. I would say it's because she has a very different kind of sensibility, and
Hmm.
she is also a fan of Kabir. So I can see the influences of that as well. So uh, as a first time like a author, it's a wonderful book, I would say.
Okay. No, I'm sold. I'm convinced that I should get it, so I'm gonna do it. Thank you for recommending.
I think we are also up to that time. And so thank you for joining my podcast. And if possible, we will join again in another episode. And
Yes, we'll talk more about
and
poetry. We'll talk more
yeah,
about books. Yeah,
and I
but
would
I
also
really
like to
loved
say
it.
that you actually justified the name of this podcast. You spoke so much. Like, although I have recorded different, I did not publish all of them because of certain reasons. But you are the only person who actually justified the name of this podcast.
I told you so. I talk so much, and sometimes it could be also like detrimental. But I think I like talking because I feel like I always want to give you the context, like when I'm saying something, I want to give you the background where I'm coming from and not just say, oh, I like this. Done. No, why I like it. I want to say that,
No,
and
I
also I feel like,
understand that, but I also like that you not just spoke a lot, but you spoke in 3x speed, and still I could understand everything.
I'm Next time, please give me feedback. Next time, I will incorporate all of the feedback, and then accordingly, we will have to talk. But
I
yeah, but I love
I'm
talking.
not
So,
I'm not asking you to change it, but I just like that. So uh,
but I really had fun because I feel like this is the kind of you know this is like it's so much in my lane, right? I like books, I like reading, and I like talking about books. So I think it's like the perfect spot for me. So thank you for inviting me today, and I also really like that you gave me some such recommendations, and I really need to up my game when it comes to Assamese books and reading. Yeah, I have to do it. I'm also gonna like visit some of the book fairs when I'm there because I know that January a lot of book fairs happen. So that's
yeah,
my
nowadays book fairs
to
are
do.
like very huge thing here. Like uh, it's they go to every district, and there are here very big publishers nowadays. So
Okay, I'll have a good time.
yeah, you'll get a lot of interesting books.
Yes, I'm looking forward to it.
Okay,
But thank you. I will let you go now, and
okay,
yeah, let's talk again very soon. And take care.
okay, okay. Bye bye. Thank you for
Bye
being in my
bye.
podcast.
Take care, Dada.